The girl turned to Hang and asked what they would be doing today, while a cute girl with cat ears stood beside her and, openly impatient, loudly said she wanted to see the main character at work as soon as possible. Hanged set his hammer on the table and said it was time to get down to business. In the throne room, as a storm raged over the kingdom of Vale, a horrified confidant told the king that the summoned hero was completely unsuitable. King Blade III said with deep sadness that this was indeed a hero from another world, though no one present could grasp the true meaning of these words. Rising from his throne, the king spoke to the chief magician, who immediately collapsed. The hero stared at his hands, unable to believe what was happening. No matter how much he tried, the result stayed the same. No unique abilities could be detected in him. The confidant did not understand which skills were meant and was given an explanation. Heroic growth, a universal language, and environmental adaptation were standard abilities always granted to new arrivals. The other mages in heavy cloaks were confused because the summoning had definitely worked, but nothing like this had ever happened before. The king, shaking with anger, ordered the chopping. The mage asked him again what exactly he meant. The confidant could not understand what was said, and then, as if from nowhere, a chilling order sounded: cut off the head of the main character. The hero froze, gripped by horror, unable to make sense of what he'd heard, and, obediently, he bowed his head. The magician stepped forward to protect the young man and begged the king to calm down. The king leapt from his throne and kept shouting that it was impossible to stay calm in a situation like this. Throwing up his hands in despair, he said they would have to wait 15 years before they could summon the next hero. The hero remained kneeling before him. With his hands over his face, the king bitterly demanded to know why this had happened, and why the summoned one had been so useless, then angrily blamed the magicians, saying it was their fault and that they had made a terrible mistake. His eyes were filled with genuine horror as he warned them they were next, said they deserved it and should not think themselves indispensable, and then vowed to destroy all magic. The men in cloaks cried out, begging His Majesty for mercy, but the king sharply ordered everyone to be silent and to stay back. The protagonist put his hand on his heart, turned to the king and asked him to wait, saying he could still help, but the king, convinced he was useless, dismissed him. Fed up with empty words, he ordered the guards to throw him out, and then a guard burst in, turned to His Majesty and said he had a brilliant idea because, after all, the people always need heroes. Officials declared the hero's summoning a success and informed the people. The protagonist remained under house arrest in the palace and was allowed out only to take part in ceremonies where he had to play the hero. People thought he had fought on the battlefield. To keep the illusion, shadow troops were sent out and false reports were circulated about his exploits. For the next 15 years he lived that way and was nicknamed the Decorative Hero. At the forge, they talked about summoning a hero, and the head blacksmith said it was time to say goodbye to Hang. Hang thanked everyone, saying he had learned a lot, and the head blacksmith reminded him that at first he could not forge even a nail. He said things were different now. The other boy added that without help they would have a very hard time. Hanged swung his hammer and struck the anvil with all his might, muttering that there was nothing he could do now, and his time here was up. Hang slammed his hammer onto the anvil, deeply aware his role here was just for show, and the royal forge had been his second home for the past 15 years. It was harsh, dirty, and dangerous, and demanded hard labor, but Hang found it less grueling than his previous life in Japan. 15 years ago, the master blacksmith who took him in when he was completely lost and alone taught him countless useful skills. He thanked him and the whole team deeply for their kindness and guidance, and the men looked at Hang with sadness, aware their journey together was coming to an end. It has been many years since the hero was summoned to this world. His path was hard, but he found loyal comrades and true friends. Hang's life became far richer and more meaningful than he ever imagined. At last, the day arrived to summon a new hero. A magical portal opened right in front of the king's throne, emitting a blinding light. The king was amazed by its power. Courtiers whispered the summoning had succeeded and was real, and the hero would soon appear before them. A long-haired girl emerged from the glow. Having addressed her, he introduced the place as the Kingdom of Vale and Astor Name. Slightly embarrassed, the girl identified herself as Endo Kanai. Hang introduced himself to her as the former hero. The girl looked confused by the word hero, but the king immediately ordered the chief mage to test her abilities. The crowd cheered, praising the impressive result and the new heroine's rare, useful skill. Mages quickly took Indokanayo away, telling her it was time to prepare for the ceremony and be presented to the people. The girl was surprised by this turn of events. The court guard told the king the country was now safe, and the king confirmed it. The king clenched his fist and announced the former hero would be rewarded with a fiefdom, explaining it was a deserted but quiet land of picturesque mountains and forests where the hero could recuperate after 15 years of battles. Aang lowered his head, knowing full well he had never left the capital, and that talk of fighting was nonsense to him. Kneeling before the king on his throne, he thanked him for the favor. It was time to say goodbye to his comrades. A carriage waited at the gate. Hing climbed in, turned to the men and thanked them again for everything. He left the kingdom as the crowd waved and shouted, inviting them to come and visit. Hang, 40, rode in a carriage drawn by 2 horses. His thoughts often returned to Japan, and he wondered what it was like now. Lately he had noticed he was growing sentimental with age. He was sure that 15 years in the capital had changed him, Sasanuki, irrevocably. After 20 days on the road, Hanging learned they had arrived. He stepped out of the carriage, complaining of severe back pain. The man who had seen him off suggested he climb a nearby hill to take in the view. Hanging thanked him. The man adjusted his hat, drove to the hill, climbed it, and saw a vast expanse open before him, leaving him at a loss for words. The whole dark forest, stretching to the horizon and ringed by tall mountains, was now his domain. Hangi turned to call to the driver to confirm this was the place, but the driver was already out of sight. Agreeing it was to be expected, he turned back toward the forest, knowing there was no point in standing here any longer. Hang pushed deeper into the forest, unsure if there was a village or which way to go, and soon spotted an abandoned hut hidden among the ancient trees, almost completely covered in moss. Cautiously, the man stepped inside and looked around. The house showed no sign of its owner for a long time. Grass grew everywhere and the air was dry, but Hang decided it would be suitable for the night, and a slight smile crossed his face. Stepping into the fresh air, he spotted an old barn in a small hollow, walked over and looked inside and found the same devastation, with cobwebs everywhere and moss covering the walls. A faint glow from this fireplace caught his eye. Hangs crossed his arms, unsure the king had truly taken care of him in that way. Maybe His Majesty was not such a bad man after all. Once outside, he realized the next problem. There was no river or any sign of a well nearby, and after looking around carefully, the situation was crystal clear. Hang extended his hand and cast a water search spell. Several sparkling drops burst from his palm. The magical moisture, obeying his will, rushed into the old barrel. The hero smiled, glad his magic was still with him. Now all that was left was to take care of food. Walking under the bright sun, he moved on. Hanged pushed deeper into the dense forest while holding his trusty knife. No matter how far he went, he found no edible plants. Even if he farmed, it would take a long time to get a harvest. A river would let him catch fish. He spotted something remarkable up ahead. Hang stepped into a wide clearing scattered with bright, fragrant flowers. Looking around, he could not believe such a beautiful place was hidden in the forest. Something else grabbed his attention immediately. In the center of the clearing lay a huge, brightly glowing lump, and he was intrigued, wondering if it was gold. Approaching the block, he found it even more massive than it had appeared from afar. A tap on the surface showed it was not ordinary metal. The ground beneath his feet then began to shake. Hanged stepped back, astonished, unable to identify the strange sound around him as a deafening flap of giant wings filled the air and the heroes stared, shocked and genuinely horrified. A huge winged dragon stood directly in front of him, towering over the field with a stern, angry look, and he fell limply to its paws, lifted his head, and realized it was a real dragon. Leaning down, the dragon sniffed the man and noticed a strange smell. It asked who he was. The man introduced himself as Hang, a former summon hero. The dragon seemed confused about what this man tore and who he was. This was the Druid Forest, a sacred place where gods, beasts, and spirits lived, he explained, and Hang repeated the name, surprised, thinking the dragon must be one of its main inhabitants. A light wind carried petals across the clearing. The cruel, sacred dragon stood right in front of the man. It looked stern and fierce, its huge mouth lined with sharp teeth. The dragon fixed Hang with its black eyes and told him to leave, saying this place was not meant for him. The man said he did not understand what the dragon was saying. Moments later, the dragon collapsed to the ground, exhausted. A deafening roar filled the air. The hero rushed to Cruel and asked what had happened to him. A terrible wound showed itself, blood oozing through the thick scales and skin. It was clear that such a wound could not be stitched with an ordinary needle. The man asked the dragon if his scales felt pain. Cruel said the scales were the dragon's armor and could not feel pain or itch. Clenching his fist, the hero told the powerful creature to wait a moment and promised to make the necessary tools, his face showing deep concentration while the dragon lay on the ground watching him with a questioning look. At his hut, Hing fetched everything he needed from the shed, set up a workstation by the fireplace, tested the bellows by blowing on the fire, and confirmed the stove reached the required temperature. At last, the master knew it was time to begin his painstaking work. Wearing protective forge gear, he swung his massive hammer decisively. The first powerful blow landed on the red-hot iron with a metallic ring, and the workshop sprang to life with renewed energy. The blacksmith clamped the red-hot metal in a special machine, and with a focused expression, methodically forged the parts he needed while a huge fireplace supplied the heat. Right beside the anvil, ready for use, stood a not-too-large container of cool water, and the whole spacious barn was filled with the steady, characteristic sounds of careful blacksmith work. After hours of intense work, the first fully finished metal part lay on the anvil in front of him. He was satisfied that one of the needed parts was ready, but 8 to 10 more were required. At that moment, the ancient dragon, asleep until then, slowly opened his huge amber eyes and barely made out the world as a voice woke him and broke his rest. Hanged turned Cruel and showed his joy, saying the dragon had come to its senses. The dragon was surprised to see a human again, felt his wound, and looked to his side. He asked what it was, and the man said it was staples used in both medicine and construction. The dragon's body was carefully connected and the bleeding stopped. Cruel asked if the healer could work with steel, and the healer said it was his only skill, noted the blood volume needed restoring, recommended iron-rich spinach, and handed over the lunch. The dragon only sniffed the food. Hanged asked if it liked the meal. He then helped everyone with surprising speed. The dragon said the food was tasty and healthy. The healer promised the dragon that if he asked, he would prepare as much food as the dragon wanted. The dragon's black eyes softened. He tried to speak to the healer but could not. The healer only laughed and told him to rest after the meal. For the first time in years, he slept beside a mighty dragon, and they rested beneath the vast, starry sky. Morning came, and the clearing greeted them with a carpet of blooming flowers, their petals dotted with diamond-like dew. Hang was asked to get up, and he yawned, aware he had slept very soundly and was finally awake. A joyful cry of relief rang out, and a woman's voice asked whether he was tired of nursing. Turning around, the hero asked not to be called just a man and introduced himself as Hang Sanuki. A girl with small horns stood directly in front of him, her hands covered in a skin-like substance and a tail behind her as she spoke to him. Her big, wide eyes watched him with a smile, clearly interested. The girl said he was magnificent, and that she could not believe he had healed her wound with iron. The man was taken aback and did not know how to respond. Sweat formed on his forehead. He asked if the girl in front of him was Cruel, and she lifted her shirt to confirm it, pointing out a scar on her stomach. Heng saw the scar had become much smaller, though not completely gone. He asked the girl to lower her shirt, assuring her he had already seen everything, and looked embarrassed. The traveler said he was glad she was feeling better, and she thanked him and asked him to listen, making the man wonder what she would say before she bowed to the hero and asked a favor. The traveler could not make sense of what the girl meant. Smiling radiantly, she declared she too had a burning desire to conquer iron and pleaded to be accepted as a student, a statement that stunned Hing. He stared at the girl, trying to make sense of what he had heard, and knew this meeting here with the sacred dragon and the mysterious druid forest at the kingdom's edge was undoubtedly fateful. After eating every last crumb, the king heard the cutlery clink and wondered what would happen next. his gaze settling on Keeney, who was very skilled. The assistant poured him wine and said that compared to that nonentity, she looked magnificent, and he soon realized he had become only a pitiful decoration in this royal spectacle. The hero had lived in the palace for 15 years and now found himself on the street. The minister wondered whether the forest animals were eating him now. The king merely laughed at the minister's anger. The minister turned to his majesty and smiled, saying that was not so. Both laughed. The dining room door burst open and a wounded soldier stumbled in, loudly reporting the losses to the king before collapsing to the floor, exhausted. The king and the prime minister stared at him in bewilderment. The king stepped closer and asked what had happened to his invincible knights. Gasping for breath, the soldier said this was unthinkable. Their weapons were useless, and their armor was as flimsy as paper. The prime minister asked why they had been defeated. Meanwhile, in the forest, Cruel explored the area and felt happy. She asked the man if it was a house, and he said it was more of a forge, and Cruel looked around, noticing many interesting things. The man looked at her and said the queen was still young, and they should be more modest. She simply grinned and said it wasn't, so he missed the hint and asked how old she was. The girl closed her eyes with a smug smile and said she would be 170 years old this year, but was still one of the youngest dragons in the world, leaving the man shocked and unable to respond. The master asked about her wound, and Cruel explained that ferocious demons had attacked her while hunting the rare divine beasts of the ancient druid lands. The man said the situation seemed very alarming. The girl admitted she had let her guard down at that moment, and stressed that normally her power made her invincible. Closing the gap between them, she stepped forward, her voice hopeful as she asked him directly if he was ready to accept her as his devoted disciple. Hang looked down at her slightly and voiced concern about the proposal. The girl reassured him, explaining that if she mastered ironworking, she would proudly show off the skill to her peers. The master closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and said he was glad she was interested in blacksmithing but still felt uneasy, while Cruel looked at him, unsure how to respond. Then Hang, smiling warmly, finally suggested they start work immediately in the spacious forge. She hugged him tightly and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. Soon they changed into work clothes and began working. Cruel asked impatiently what they were making and whether it was a weapon. Hang paused to think and asked her to give him some time. Remembering his past work with weapons, he decided to try making knives. The girl asked what she should do, and he told her to watch and learn because it was essential. She said she understood. Work in the forge was in full swing as the girl watched the master blacksmith raise his hammer to shape a weapon. The air filled with the ringing of metal. The girl stared at the molten steel, and what she saw shocked her deeply. Sighing, the protagonist kept working and soon finished his work. Turning around, he noticed a frustrated, Cruel woman shaking as she looked at the knife she had just made and apologized to her, saying he had gotten too deep into the process. Cruel beamed and smiled, saying there was no need to apologize because it had been so much fun watching him work, adding that she was amazed at his speed and beamed with happiness. The hero said this was not the final life yet. It still had to be fired. The piece would be sprinkled with grain and heated. The girl asked if everything would be ready after that. The blacksmith replied no, the metal was not sticky enough. Cruel did not know what the word meant. The man explained it was the metal's ability to hold its shape. The girl laughed, intrigued by the explanation. She asked what they were doing now and whether they were using oil. Hang explained that heating the metal slowly made it sticky, and then all that was left was to sharpen it. Holding out the blank, he showed her the work, and she was amazed. Holding up the finished kitchen knife, the man announced it was ready. The blade seemed to glow. Cruel said it was amazing. The man said he planned to make 5 more of these items by the end of the day, and that Cruel would be able to help him. This news brought a radiant smile to the girl's face. The blacksmith added they would make more of them and sell them in the nearest town. The heroes settled at the city market by the fountain and laid several knives on the stall in front of them. The blacksmith threw his head back and admitted he had not expected such a small demand. Young women and couples were the main buyers at the market. Jewelry and toys sold well, but tools were not in great demand. Cruel turned to Hang and suggested that since they were in the city, they could try selling swords to mercenaries. The protagonist thought about making swords. Suddenly they heard a cry begging them to stop. Begging to be let go, a girl was led away by bandits who roughly ordered her to be silent. They dropped her on the ground and she sobbed and screamed. The girl excitedly explained the sword she was showing was valuable and told them to move aside if they were not going to buy it. But the group with the stain stared at her and one of them threw the sword to the ground, asking why she even called it a sword. A soldier stepped on the sword, puzzled about what it was. Grasping the hilt, he began to draw his sword from its sheath. The soldier said he would now show the girl a real masterpiece. The sword was made at the royal court. The soldier started bragging about his weapon, saying the sword was light and tough, that it could even cut through a demon and that a fake could not match it. And his comrades agreed it looked impressive while he stayed standing on the sword. Cruel, who had watched every move of the smug soldier, showed clear disgust at such arrogant people and firmly urged that they be given a proper rebuff at once. The blacksmith rose slowly from his seat, gently stroked the girl's head, scanned the surroundings, and then, in a calm but firm voice, ordered her to wait patiently where she was. The soldiers noticed the man and asked what he wanted. The hero said he had heard how proud the soldier was of his sword, but being stepped on went too far. The soldier raised his weapon, ordered them to be silent, and shouted that no one could tell him what to do. Cruel, who had been watching the tense scene from the sidelines, grew seriously frightened and suddenly worried for the blacksmith's safety, overwhelmed with shock at what was happening. In an instant, the weapon swung with a sharp, whistling arc, and at the same moment a shower of bright white sparks flashed, blinding the air around it. A deafening, piercing ring echoed through the area, and a large piece of the sword flew off and slammed onto the hard, dusty ground. The soldier stared at his sword in shock and said it was broken. The protagonist remained calm, stood his ground, held his sharp knife casually in one hand, and watched everything closely. Soldiers cursed and fell back. And as the man watched them go, a cheering crowd surged toward the main character, everyone trying to call it amazing, while others wondered what trick he used against the sword. Rule hugged him happily from the side. Hangek said there was no trick and added that the object in his hand was not a sword. Someone called from the side and he turned. The injured girl came up with tears in her eyes, took his hands and thanked the swordmaster warmly. The man held up the knife and explained he was not a swordsman but a blacksmith. The girl asked for a minute, used recognition magic at once, and the result shocked her as her face darkened and she put her hand to her mouth. Trembling, she asked what kind of knife it was, then realized it was an S-rank item, though she had thought it was ordinary, and the characteristics flashed in her mind. Manufacturer Hang, S-rank. Item rank classifies value, rarity, and power under royal court rules. SS marks ancient relics like sacred weapons and tools. The protagonist stared at his knife, unable to believe it was S-rank. Seizing the knife, the girl begged him to sell it to her, shouting that she would pay 16 or even 20 gold coins for it. The man had no idea what they were talking about. Cruel seized the moment, pulled out the remaining knives and said they had more. The customer asked whether they were the same knives. She confirmed every knife was S-rank. The blacksmith stood behind, staring in disbelief. Smiling, the girl handed over a bag of money and said she was buying all 5 knives. They were wrapped up for her right away. In this world, 1 gold coin was worth about 10,000 yen, so the protagonist earned a full million on the first day. The city streets thrummed with activity and noise, and the heroes took shelter in a cafe where they continued to discuss the recent events. Filner Raza, a merchant, introduced herself and said she was happy to meet the protagonist. A man holding a cup returned the sentiment. The heroes walked the city's bright streets, talking and celebrating the deal. Turning to Miss Vilner, he asked if she was really sure she wanted to spend 100 gold pieces given her old, patched coat. Lowering her head, the girl asked whether she could pay in installments and apologized, explaining that she often lost control when she saw something truly valuable. Filner admitted this could make her seem like a traitor and cause problems, but she promised to be honest and trustworthy. Her concerns were obvious. Then Hang, while Cruel was asleep on the table, asked to propose one condition since everything was going well overall, and Miss Filner agreed without hesitation. Shaking his finger, the hero said they would make a contract. He refused to sell his knives to other merchants, insisting she be the only seller. The girl jumped up from her chair in surprise. She confirmed she understood correctly that she would receive exclusive rights to sell the S-rank knives. The girl asked whether Hang truly wanted it, since it was a very generous offer. The protagonist said he'd always had a weakness for communication, gently stroking the sleeping Cruel's head and adding that since they were working together, he did not want to spread himself too thin. He needed Raza to handle all the necessary paperwork and details, and the girl, placing her hand on her chest, assured him this would not be a problem. He handed her a small map showing the knives had to be picked up at the marked spot. She took the paper and was surprised to learn he lived in the Druid forest. The news stunned her. The hero said he had his own reasons. Just then Cruel woke, waved her hand and told Filner that if Filner got lost, she only had to shout and Cruel would come get her. Raza asked if Cruel was a beast man. Yawning, she said she was a sacred dragon, which stunned Raza. Raza covered her mouth with her hand and muttered that it could not be, while the protagonist laughed and told her to take her word for it. Evening fell over the city, and warm light spilled through the old hut in the forest. Inside, dinner awaited them on a table piled with delicious dishes. Cruel said happily it was a real feast. Hanged urged everyone to eat well now that they had money for food. The table was indeed full of food. Enjoying the pizza, the girl said it was very tasty, and praised the main character as an excellent cook. After eating her fill, her belly was noticeably rounded and she was completely happy. Now, she said she had to help with the dinner, and the man asked what she would bring. Cruel waved her hands to show she wanted to bring a huge pig. Cruel took the bow and said she wanted to borrow it. She soon set off, and the man watched her go, wondering why she needed it. Moments later, a huge dragon crashed down nearby with a roar. The protagonist ran up to Cruel and asked why she had assumed her true form again. The dragon was visibly shaking and sighed heavily. Regaining her human form, the girl began to cry. Turning toward him, she said the bow was broken. It had split in half. The man noticed. He stroked her hair gently, calming her and telling her not to cry. Cruel said she had found a boar and pulled with all her might, but the bow could not hold. The hero realized her ordinary bow could not handle her strength. Cruel held her thin finger straight ahead. In that instant, the whole image came together. When the boar disappeared, Cruel became a dragon, and it panicked and hid in the cave from her. Hanged gently placed his hand on the girl's head again in a soft, comforting gesture, stroked her hair, and quietly but firmly told her to trust him completely and rely entirely on his abilities. He promised to make for her not just a bow, but an ideal weapon tailored to her unique features, and when she heard this, Cruel changed instantly, her face brightening with an extraordinary radiance. At first light, Hang's old forge quickly came alive with busy, lively work, the air ringing with metal and smelling of hot coals. Standing motionless in the center of his workshop, the man looked around and weighed which stage to begin in this complex, responsible process of making the perfect weapon. Hanged quickly figured that if absolute strength were the only criterion, ordinary iron would be suitable, but the metal would be far too heavy for the product he had in mind. He knew a heavier bow would reduce its accuracy and make it less effective, so he had to find a completely different, more suitable metal. The protagonist carefully examined all the metal stock in his forge, and when he opened one of the old boxes, he found pure, shining silver inside. The protagonist held a heavy handful of the strange metal, trying to understand how such a large amount of rare silver had ended up in his old forge. Hein came out of the hut and turned Cruel. She was drawing patterns on the ground. He asked her to dig a hole. The girl did not at first understand why that was necessary, but she immediately began her transformation into a dragon. In her giant form, she dug fiercely, so fast the man asked her to stop. Out of breath, the dragon asked why he needed this hole, and the protagonist explained they were now using it to make a bow. Hanged impromptu workshop. The first step was to prepare the hole, which had to be long and narrow, exactly what Cruel Doug insisted on, even if it was a bit larger than needed. The second and equally important step was to carefully prepare the tree. Pointing at an object, the protagonist said they planned to use a pre-made stick for this task. To prevent possible later destruction, it had to be deeply embedded in the main structure and then lightly coated with a special release agent. The next required step was to insert the prepared stick securely and accurately into the hole specially designed for it. The third and equally important step in the series of actions was to create the required form directly. On the bare ground, a complex, mysterious magic circle slowly appeared. The girl gasped as the sand hardened instantly. The man said they could now pull the tree out and that it had a beautiful shape. The first stage was successfully completed. The fourth stage was smelting. The heroes stood at the improvised furnace and now had to pull the mold out. The girl said she understood everything. Cruel held the mold in her hands and asked if she was doing it right, and the protagonist was surprised she could lift it bare-handed with molten metal inside, but she reassured him that there was nothing to worry about, and the heat meant nothing to her. The girl understood everything, and now he was going to pour iron into the hole. Hang's mouth fell open, amazed at how quickly she grasped it all. The fifth stage, pouring, was finished, and everything had cooled. They stood near the ground, and it was time to extract the blank. The girl watched with undisguised delight, saw the man standing in front of her, and began to extract the blank. The girl twirled the rod in her hands and found it surprisingly light, handling it deftly while Hang explained it was an unusual metal called aluminum in his world. The girl looked at the hero, unsure what it was. He said the material was light yet strong and easy to work with, that they would bend it to form the bow's curve, and that they were doing everything correctly. Prul asked whether it could be bent right now. The man laughed and explained it was a special metal alloyed with many elements, not just pale silver. However, before he could finish, the girl suddenly bent the piece of metal with her bare hands and shaped it as needed. Jubilant, Cruel lifted the blanket over her head, said everything was ready, and smiled at him. The hero was amazed by the girl's strength. A bow hung at her side, ready to be tested, and she drew the string, knocked an arrow, struck the target, but the arrow snapped. This deeply upset her, and she visibly slumped with her shoulders drooping. The man just scratched his head thoughtfully and calmly told her that now all the arrowheads would definitely have to be reinforced. Even though it failed, the girl was thrilled and said what happened was pretty cool. Cruel said with relief that her favorite bow was completely intact. Wildly, unimaginably happy and openly jubilant, she confidently declared that this time she would definitely catch that elusive boar. The protagonist thought hard because, after his earlier failure, he had reason to worry. He truly hoped that her bright, contagious joy would never leave her heart. Hying carefully asked Krull if he could watch her upcoming hunt, and the girl turned to him with a slight smile and said, of course he could. After a while, they hunted in a dark forest. Hidden in the bushes, they scanned for new prey. The girl spotted a huge boar running through the trees, and the main character asked whether they should hunt it since the beast was so large. The girl said yes. Cruel drew her bow and aimed straight at the target. Hang suddenly told Cruel to stop, saying Cruel was overexerting herself. Despite all the persuasion, the girl shot the arrow straight from the bow. It flew quickly and the bow did not break. She hit the target, killing the boar through and through. A small light lit everything and a soft breeze blew. The man began to defend himself against it. The girl simply watched her victory, the bow in her hands. Delighted, she watched as the bow worked and thought it was amazing, and the armored man said he believed she had done it. The girl protested, insisting that was not true, and adding that the master's bow was amazing, without which she could not have killed the demonic boar in one shot. The protagonist turned and saw the aluminum bow was also S rank. He had no idea what was happening with his forging skills. Night wrapped the quiet forest where a moss-covered hut stood, soft light spilling from its windows. The main characters approached the table where the dish waited for them. Cruel sighed voluntarily, noting how appetizing it looked. A plate sat before them, and beside it a saucepan sent up steam over slices of meat. The girl asked what kind of brown soup it was, and the man explained it was made from miso, noting her confusion. Offering his hand, the hero explained it was a seasoning made from fermented soybeans with added salt and melted rice, and he urged her to taste it, assuring her it was excellent. The girl picked up the chopsticks and put a piece of meat in her mouth, her cruel eyes widening and sparkling as she smiled, let a cry escape her chest, and said it was simply delicious, truly happy. The man said that while serving at court, he had some free time and used it to hone his cooking skills. He thanked Cruel for her support and offered her as much food as she wanted. The girl with the bowl kept eating contentedly and nodded in approval. At that very moment, Hang sat next to the peacefully sleeping Seo, finishing the last of the knives and lost in thought. He still could not understand how he had forged such a perfect knife that held the previously unattainable S rank. He began to wonder whether the grueling training and his master's stern reprimands had been for nothing. The blacksmith had always scolded him about his work. The hero had long thought his products barely reached the D or E ranks. Sitting at the table, slowly eating a simple, nourishing meal, he suddenly felt a warm concern about how his old, wise mentor was doing now. In the kingdom, the blacksmith drew on his pipe and said he hoped everything was going well for Hang. And two people who had noticed him came over, saying he often spoke of his former apprentice, with one adding that he did not like the hero. The man winced, his face puzzled. He honestly didn't understand what was happening and wondered who had said he didn't like his former apprentice. The assistant said he was always shouting, and one added that he hadn't even come to see him off, while the blacksmith chuckled and admitted it was typical of him, saying the young man had not yet matured into his true rank. The two assistants asked about the rank of the swords and armor their former colleague had made. The man took a deep drag and said they were at least a rank, and the assistant winced before crying out in surprise. The head blacksmith crossed his arms and said that if he'd told the apprentice earlier, the apprentice would have grown proud. Since the apprentice was B rank, the weapons should match that rank. The assistants looked at one another, talking about what they'd heard. They were amazed because blacksmiths who could make A-rank weapons were very rare. The chief blacksmith rose quickly and loudly called them idiots. He suggested they try giving such a weapon to a regular soldier, saying it was too dangerous even to look at. The men fell silent and admitted he was right, then wondered why Hang had been banished despite his talent. He sat down again and lit a cigarette. He guessed the king had thought long and hard about the decision. One of his aides wondered if the king had a hidden agenda, or had simply exiled the boy without thinking it through. Drawing a long drag, the chief blacksmith stared into the distance and said slowly that, if that were true, it would mean the end of their country. At dawn, the first rays of the sun lit the forest house, and Hang's muffled cry called for help. The girl woke up and rubbed her eyes sleepily. She went to the master to ask what he was doing since they were supposed to have a day off. Her gaze fell on the stove outside, and she asked whether he had built it himself. The man said he wanted to check something. If the secret to creating an S rank was in this furnace, he would have to hone his skills in another one. So he stepped aside, explained it was hard to control the temperature outside, and asked Cruel to help him. The girl brightened. The protagonist turned to Cruel for help, pulled an impressive bucket, and the man began forging as the air filled with the hammer's steady blows on the metal. The hero decided that if the furnace held the secret of rank S, he would test his skill on another furnace. He stepped forward, explaining it was hard to control the temperature outside, and asked Cruel for help. The girl perked up and agreed, clearly pleased. The man then dragged a large bucket of water to the blazing furnace, hung it, stood at the forge, and began the forging process. Rhythmic hammer blows filled the air as they struck the red-hot metal, and under their force, the blank gradually took the shape of the future weapon. Standing together, the heroes heard Heng's loud cry announcing that everything was ready, and the girl held a glowing, sparkling knife, amazed that the blade forged on the street was equally excellent. He glanced at the finished weapon and realized he couldn't tell whether it was S or A rank without appraisal skills. His gaze dropped to a nearby tree stump. The girl turned to Hang, asking what it was. He reached for his glowing blade. It was a sword broken in an earlier fight with an armed soldier in the city, and he had picked up the pieces. Hanged walked to the stump and after a few swings struck the blade. It took only a small nick and did not break in two. The hero realized the knife he forged in that furnace had fully cut the king's sword, while this blade only cut it halfway, so the weapon was rank A. He handed the knife to Cruel, noting the furnace clearly hid some kind of power, while Hanged gave it a questioning look and admitted the knife they had made was still quite good. Her ears suddenly twitched at a sound, and she jumped up, saying they had a client, but the man did not at once understand what she meant. At that moment, the girl transformed into a mighty dragon and flew above the treetops to take someone. Heng had just watched the dragon fly away, but it returned within seconds. The man was drenched in sweat. It was Miss Filner, trembling with astonishment and fear as she greeted Master Heng. They entered a small house tucked in the forest. The man apologized to Miss Filner for scaring her and offered a cup of water, and she said everything was fine. The heroes only looked at the frightened girl with sympathy and seemed truly sorry, and she sipped water and said there was no need to apologize and that next time she would just jump into the carriage and come on her own. Cruel beat her chest, declaring that the druid forest was full of monsters and that it was extremely dangerous to come here without an escort, and added that if anything happened she could carry the cart herself quickly and safely. Miss Filner only looked away and thanked her. Frowning, she said she had important news and complained about their knife. The heroes perked up at the news. They had not expected any complaints. Cruel immediately grew aggressive, her eyes lighting up, and she could not understand the complaints because the Hangas knives were excellent and nothing seemed wrong with them. His expression turned cruel as he urged her to calm down and anxiously asked what the problem was. Filmer just looked down and quietly said the knife was too good. The hero froze briefly, not immediately grasping what she meant. Then the woman slowly raised her gaze and said, with startling clarity, that the blade was simply too sharp. She continued her story, telling the group that she had recently sold one of those seemingly perfect blades to a young, still rather inexperienced novice cook. That same cook, through his carelessness, dropped the blade and it barely grazed his hand. But fortunately, nothing serious or life-threatening happened. Miss Filmer said the real shock came next. The knife blade sank into the floor up to the hilt. The heroes shuddered at the news. Their faces showed horror and foreboding. The girl knelt before Master Hang while the others watched silently. Leaning over, she admitted she understood how unique his technique was and the enormous effort it took to achieve that level of perfection. Closing her eyes, she admitted her request might seem rude and asked them to please make the knives a little less sharp. The protagonist closed his eyes, thinking it would be insulting to ask a blacksmith to deliberately ruin his work, and he knew Miss Filner understood that. That explains her embarrassment. The man asked her to lift her head, and she obeyed. He smiled at her and promised to make a less sharp knife. The hero admitted it had hurt his pride somewhat, but stressed that user safety and convenience come first. Tears brimmed in the shopkeeper's eyes. She turned to Master Hang. The protagonist handed her one of the knives, saying he had recently forged a similar one. The girl, a fan of magic, confirmed the knife was also A rank. Filmer's assessment confirmed the blacksmith's theory. The piece he'd forged was clearly a lower rank than the previous one, and he still did not understand why, since the knives made in that special furnace always outranked his regular work. Hang said if this option suited her, he would keep making those knives. The girl stood up. They shook hands, and she thanked the master sincerely. A few days later, Miss Filmer returned by cart to visit the protagonist. Her face shone with happiness and a smile. She shouted joyfully to the Master Hang that all the goods were sold out. The man did not immediately believe her, and a light sweat appeared on his face. Saying the knives were selling like hotcakes, she targeted housewives and was soon surrounded by women eager to buy. He admitted he was impressed by her trading skills. She patted his shoulder and said it was all thanks to his knives, so he shouldn't be modest. They both laughed. She crossed her arms and calmly said their workshop had already received many more orders, and asked if they could make another 100 of these knives. Her colossal figure stunned the man, his heart skipping a few beats as he realized he really had to make a whole 100 more of them and began to tremble. Miss Filner saw his confusion and patted him encouragingly on the back, radiating confidence in his skill as a new chapter in his forge's history opened, bringing recognition. In response to her words, the hero laughed softly, relieved and growing more excited at the thought of the huge task ahead. Without warning, a fierce thunderstorm erupted, instantly engulfing everything in an impenetrable darkness that swallowed the last glimmer of daylight. A sharp flash of lightning cut through the dense forest, briefly lighting the trees' silhouettes. A young girl with unusually pointed ears wandered uncertainly through the wet undergrowth. Her clothes were soaking wet, and she looked dazed. Whispering Mom and Dad through trembling lips, she stood in the middle of the rainy forest, voice heavy with despair and unsure which way to go. Rain battered the window, turning the forest into a thick, impenetrable curtain of water and pouring steadily onto the house's dilapidated roof. The leaky roof couldn't handle the pressure, and drops of water fell in a steady rhythm into a bucket placed under a particularly large leak. The man watched with growing alarm, fearing the house would flood and their meager possessions be hopelessly ruined. Suddenly, Cruel came up behind him without a sound. She gave a sharp, piercing scream to frighten him, and the man flinched. His shoulders jumped, and he nearly dropped the mug. Soaking wet, with her hair plastered to her face, the girl smiled contentedly, and, pleased with her trick, asked Hang if she had succeeded in scaring him. Hanging asked Cruel what her expression was, but thanked her anyway for her help. The girl said she looked like she had taken a bath, and the man said she was wet. She had climbed onto the roof to board up the holes. His girlfriend claimed she was a dragon and couldn't catch a cold, but then sneezed loudly and theatrically. And Hanging, seeing she was still completely wet, advised her to say such things to someone else. Cruel was soaked, her clothes and hair dripping, and the man turned away to hide a small smile before handing her a fluffy towel. They warmed her not just with the fire but also with hot, delicious food. Cruel asked eagerly what they would have for dinner. Thick, fragrant steam rose from a large cast-iron pot on the hearth. The hero lifted the lid to reveal rich meat. It was stewed pork, the meat of the boar they'd hunted a few days earlier. The girl noticed how tender it was and how thick and rich the broth was. She put a large piece into her mouth, said it was simply delicious, closed her eyes, and savored the delicate, incredibly rich flavor she had never tasted before. Pang laughed and said she always said that whenever she ate his cooking. The girl shook her hands and assured him that everything the master cooked was always extraordinary and magically delicious. Despite the praise, Hang still felt slightly unsatisfied. He believed finding more varied ingredients would make the dishes even more perfect and delicious. In the world he now lived in, miso and soy sauce existed. There even seemed to be a whole culture built around clever techniques for making dashi broth, and he wondered if the heroes summoned from his home world had passed the tradition down. Hang folded his arms and decided it was time to eat too. Looking up, he was surprised to find his bowl of food completely missing. Only chopsticks sat on the table. He blinked in confusion as he tried to understand what had happened. Turning Cruel, he told her she didn't have to take his portion too. Frowning, the girl put another juicy piece of meat in her mouth and grumbled that she hadn't eaten his portion and never would have. Curious, the protagonist asked who had taken the strange girl, but a cruel man cut him off, covered his mouth, and placed a finger on the girl's lips to call for silence. Something shook and rumbled under the table, heightening the tension, and the main characters exchanged glances and decisively moved closer together. They steeled themselves and crawled under the table, hearts racing with nervous anticipation, and what they saw made their eyes widen. A girl with cat ears sat under the table, unaware of her surroundings and chewing a piece of fresh meat, when the protagonist suddenly stood up and spoke loudly, clearly confused by what was happening. The girl crawled out from under the table, soaked and bewildered. Cruel wasted no time, grabbed her by the hair and yelled for her to stop. Caught off guard, she had no answer. The girl angrily said the cat girl was a thief who had stolen enhanced food. The cat girl sat on the floor with her head down, looking scared, and quickly apologized, saying she was very hungry. Cruel refused to forgive her misdeed and sternly said that being hungry did not give her the right to take someone else's, and the man intervened to ask the girl to calm down because Cruel had already scolded her enough. The girl trembled with fear and was stunned by what was happening. Hanged turned to her with concern when he saw she was soaked. The girl said her name was Sue. The man began drying her wet things to help. The protagonist said his name was Hang and asked what she was doing in the rain. In that moment, Sue's expression changed and she started to cry, asking the hero to help her find her mom and dad. Tuz's wet clothes and towels hung on the line to dry. The main character sat opposite her and asked why she seemed lost. Ignoring the question, the girl kept eating from her plate and said it tasted very good. Cruel asked whether she was from the tribe of white wolves. The man fell silent, embarrassed, and not understanding what was being discussed. Sue kept enjoying her meal and looked very content. The girl said the white wolves were a tribe of divine beasts living in the druids' forests. Hearing the word divine, the man's expression changed, and he stood up in surprise. Cruel stayed calm and noted she was much stronger than those creatures. She explained Druid as a forest of gods, beasts, and spirits where magical creatures live. Most are gods or spirits. They have their own territory, but the white wolves are a wandering tribe. The protagonist was puzzled because he didn't know the meaning of the word wandering and couldn't picture how vast the forest was. The girl told him the forest was about the size of 200 human cities. The number stunned him, and the vast spaces overwhelmed him. Looking at Sue, he saw how lost she seemed in such a big world, and the girl bowed her head in sadness. However, Cruel pushed his thoughts aside. There was no point in feeling sorry for her. She had probably done something to anger her tribe's leader. The man asked whether she had been kicked out of the pack. Cruel calmly replied that such things sometimes happened. Indignantly, Sue interrupted, insisting that this was not true. She spoke with emotion, saying children find it hard to keep up with adults. If you fall behind, you lose your sense of where you are. The protagonist wondered if that meant she couldn't keep up with her pack. Looking at Sue, he saw that she was crying. 15 years of injustice and failure replayed in his mind. The girl turned to him with hope. He stroked her head, and the man said calmly that he would help refine your parents. At those words, Sue lifted her head slightly and smiled. Cruel watched this scene from behind, arms crossed over her chest, and an expression that promised nothing good. The sky slowly cleared, and the rain finally stopped as the main characters walked through the forest, carefully stepping through the many puddles left by the recent storm. Everyone was in high spirits, and Sue, dressed in warm clothes, walked ahead with genuine joy on her face, while someone hanging back watched her carefully and reminded her not to run too far because it could be dangerous. Turning, she smiled and said she was fine, but then she caught her foot on a protruding branch and, as if in slow motion, fell forward. The protagonist grabbed her by the back just in time to stop her from falling, her face showing complete bewilderment as she looked at him gratefully and said thank you, while a girl nearby watched with slight displeasure. With a reproachful look, Cruel told him not to spoil the girl too much, jealousy in her eyes as she noticed how Hang cared for Sue. Hang, trying to calm her, said it was all right because Sue was still a child, while the girl ran around them happily, ignoring the warnings. Cruel closed her eyes inside and explained that Sue was a divine being and the forest's nature could be very harsh, so spoiling the girl would hurt her development. Hang only nodded in agreement, but Sue loudly asked if he really understood what Cruel was talking about. The hero turned to his friend and said he understood her concern about Sue and that she might not like this girl. Surprise showed on the girl's face. She slapped her tail on the ground and said confidently, "It wasn't that." Suddenly, everything around her brightened, and Hang felt himself pulled away from the approaching glow. Cruel transformed into a mighty dragon and soared into the air. From high above, she could see everything and growled as she searched for the wolves. Sue looked up at the dragon, her eyes wide with surprise. Meanwhile, Cruel flew into the sky searching for the girl's parents or any nearby flock. Hanged stayed with Sue and watched the dragon vanish into the distance. Taking out his camping kit, he started forging knives as hammer blows echoed through the forest. Soon he noticed something odd off to the side, but Cruel still had not returned. Sue was sleeping on the ground, curled up in a ball, looking defenseless and peaceful with a slight smile on her face. Hang thought he should have said earlier that she wanted to sleep. He stroked her head gently and wondered how he seemed to her. Looking up at the sky, he drifted back into thoughts about what was happening around them and found comfort in knowing he and Sue were on this journey together. The dog looked very hungry. Hearing a sound, Sue became alert. Still listening, she asked the hero not to disturb her. The girl realized the ash hounds were closing in. Hanging realized these hounds were only C-ranked demons, but a whole pack of them was dangerous. The hero asked the girl which way the demons hadn't been heard yet, and she said they were to the south. Hanged decided to leave right away. Sue was worried about the things she had left behind, but the man promised they'd pick them up later. The creatures were closing in. The girl, frightened, asked the hero to run faster. The man said he was already an old former hero. Hang knew that even though he was only a decorative figure without special skills, he still had great strength. Because the mage had summoned him from another world, the hero's physical power was greater than anyone else's. He told himself the forge was already very close. The man's only hope was to run to the forge because animals avoid fire and will not go near a lit forge. By the time they caught up with him, the hero was already counting on his victory. Angry, hungry hounds inspired fear. Hang realized they were surrounded by very smart creatures. The man lowered Sue from his arms. The hero moved in front of the girl, using his body as a shield and holding out the knife he had forged himself, ready to defend himself. Hanged paused because there were too many enemies and he had to protect the girl. Stepping out from behind the hero, Sue headed toward the hounds. The man told her to go back. Barking at the enemies, the beast woman impressed the hero. Hing wondered why he was even standing there watching the girl try so hard. Hing admitted that Sue was much braver than he was. The man doubted he was worthy of the title hero. He believed anyone who cannot protect even a child does not deserve to be called a decoration. The dog rushed at Sue. The girl closed her eyes in fear, but they managed to save her. Hangi managed to cover the girl and swing his knife to kill the enemy. The attack succeeded, and he looked pleased. The other creatures didn't care. They kept grinning and calling for the other's dog that might be nearby, and the hero wondered what to do. Hang recognized the pack's leader and knew he had to deal with him. At that moment, someone called out to them. A dragon stood up for his friends. Cruel was furious, offended that the hounds dared to mock her friends. Hanging and Sue recognized their friend, who easily handled the enemies. The surviving demons retreated, and the hero worried the survivors would hang around the forge and become a threat. The hounds could not escape, and wolves from the Sioux tribe dealt with them. The wolves saw and realized someone was caring for their girl. The hero admired how strong they were since they did not seem exhausted. The wolves thanked the human for protecting Sue. Cruel transformed into a humanoid and ran to Hang, whom she hugged immediately. Apologizing for leaving the hero alone, the dragon was relieved that he was safe. The wolves hugged Sue warmly, and she was finally glad to be found. Cruel thanked Sue for protecting the blacksmith, but Sue did not understand why. The dragon explained she had heard the barking and found them, and the girl realized the wolf cub had protected her friend, leaving Cruel very grateful. Sue received a cowbell as a gift for the divine beast. The blacksmith said that if she was separated from her family again, they could find her by the bell's sound. Sue enjoyed the gift. Hang told Sue to take care of herself. The wolves said goodbye to the heroes. Believing she had eaten his fried eggs, he told her to ask him directly if she wanted any, and not to take them secretly. The girl protested because she had not eaten them. Her plate was empty, and she was very hungry. Both the dragon and the man suddenly grew suspicious. Sue had eaten the eggs. The girl said she was lost again. Heavy rain fell over the kingdom. The man knew that if the heavy rain continued, he would only have more work to do. The prime minister shouted at the workers and ordered them to stop the leak. He yelled that the rain was staining the blue rose. A carpet had been dyed blue with a special technique envied by other kingdoms. The prime minister yelled that it was leaking everywhere. He ordered the leak stopped. The prime minister left in anger while the workers grinned at the situation. They realized the palace corridors were leaking and that the same thing was happening everywhere. A worker wondered why the forge had not been making tiles for a long time and thought this might be causing the leak. Another worker remembered that about 2 or 3 years after Hing arrived, the leaks somehow stopped. The workers remembered that the forge's roof had different tiles and found it beautiful. The foreman said the break was over and it was time to get back to work. The man wondered what Heji was doing now. The girls asked the blacksmith what they were going to do today. The hero wanted to remodel the barn, but the dragon did not understand him. The man said he wanted to remove walls and add more rooms, including a room for Sue and a guest room. Hang said the wolf cub was easily stressed by the pack and was temporarily in his care, so they needed a room for her and for guests. The blacksmith's main task that day was to replace the tiles on the roof and on the forge, and the girls did not know what tiles were. These are clay bricks, very strong and heat-resistant, stacked in layers as the master showed with his hands. The hero explained that a tiled roof keeps the house cool in summer and warm in winter because it retains heat, making it ideal for a blacksmith. Prul saw that the tiles resembled her scales. The hero suggested they go together to get some clay from the nearest mountain. The girls were ready to help him. The boys gathered the clay. Now it had to be kneaded. Sue said hang. Cruel at a clay. The blacksmith saw the girl's talent for art. The figurine was very well made. The man asked Sue to help him, and she agreed. The girl noticed something odd and asked Hang if it was a weapon, and the master replied that it was an extruder. Hang explained how to use the extruder. First, load the material by putting the clay into the top. The next step is shaping. Place a board with a handle on top and press. The blacksmith said the most important thing is to push the clay straight out, or it will crack as it dries. Third, cut the workpiece with the thread. The girls handled the task well. The fourth stage is drying. The boys spread the cut clay out and let it dry for several days. The boys needed a stove to bake the clay, and the blacksmith suggested digging a hole in the street to make one. The girls helped too, digging 2 holes and linking them underground so air could keep the fire burning. And Haying said they would use the kiln to bake tiles. Glazing is the 5th step. Blacksmiths dip the tiles in glaze and dry them again, because if they are not dried properly, the tiles will crack during firing. In the 6th stage, firing, processed tiles are placed in a kiln and kept at low heat for an extended period. Once the process finished, the tiles were ready. The girls were impressed that the tiles were real and still shiny and slippery. The man explained that glazing the clay will coat it with a glassy layer that repels water and dirt. The blacksmith said the roof had to be laid now. The man was laying the roof with the girls' help, and the girlfriends were happy they finished so quickly. Hang warned them not to get too excited yet, since they still had to check for leaks in the roof. Standing on the tiles, the blacksmith used water magic to summon a stream that crashed down onto the barn roof. The hanging nearly fell off the roof, but everything turned out fine. He asked Sue if there were any leaks, and she said there were none. The guys were really happy that it all worked out for them. He remembered living at the palace, where he was not only a blacksmith but also did part-time work. Once the foreman called him to make tiles because there were not enough workers. Back then, unglazed tiles were a fashionable red but not very durable, so they had to be replaced often. Hanging was often sent to change the tiles, so he made a glaze and began using it. In the end, the hero made the forge's roof from durable glazed tiles, but the palace did not adopt it, so it kept the traditional roof. The man hoped the new roof would stop rain from flooding the palace. The Prime Minister was deeply worried about the palace carpet. To him, the flood in the castle was a real disaster. Hang told Cruel to bring the pots and pans. Cruel brought them and asked what they were. They then allowed her to open them and look. She looked into the pot. It had delicious, appealing food. The girls immediately began to eat and thanked the hero for her, while the blacksmith asked them to wait a minute. Hange offered them oil to try the full range of flavors. Cruel asked what he was offering them. Sue guessed clay. The hero ordered the potatoes cut and placed a pat of butter on top, which melted immediately. The girls said it looked delicious. Impressed, they asked to try it. Impressed, the girls ate potatoes with butter as if they had never tasted it before. The man asked them to calm down because butter was expensive. Hanged sold several knives to buy butter, a luxury in this world. Buttered potatoes were a reward for the boys' hard work. A few days later, the hero went to cut down a tree that looked good. Just as he swung his axe, a ball of strange light appeared on the trunk, and he froze in fear. The girls rushed over and complained that he was trying to cut down the tree, saying they must not be cut down, or he will get angry. Hanged did not understand them and asked again who would be angry. Cruel said it was Druita. The blacksmith assumed it was just the forest's name. The dragon said Druita was the god of this forest, very important, and would be angry if Hangai cut down the tree. Sue said Druid becomes terrifying when he is angry and is stronger than her mom and dad. The blacksmith asked what would happen if he cut down the tree, and the dragon said he would vanish from the world, which shocked the man. Hang asked about the ball of light that had appeared before him. Cruel said it was a piece of God that sometimes appeared as light. The blacksmith understood the girl, but said they still needed wood to build an extension to the hut. The dragon said that in that case you had to place an offering near the tree to draw it. The hero considered what he could offer. The light ball offered him oil. Hanger said it was already done and wondered how God knew about the oil. Druida reminded him what was in the wooden box. The girls got angry with the man after he said the oil had already run out. The hero felt the seed's embarrassment. The blacksmith gave Druida buttered potatoes. The girls told the hero the god was pleased, and the hero said the butter tasted good. Svet told the man to take care of the tree he planned to cut down and then flew away from the boys. After the tree was safely cut down, construction finished and all the rooms were ready. Suddenly, an unfamiliar girl appeared by the blacksmith's hut after recognizing the house in the forest. An armed elf attacked patrons in the tavern, then hurled one man so far he thought his time had come. She said her sword was not meant to kill people like him, and the girl behind the counter, as a token of gratitude, offered the warrior something on the house. The cook held a knife made by Hang in his hands. The elf noticed it, took it in her hands, and addressed the girl as mistress. The tavern owner said she was already married. The warrior asked who had made the knife. The girl said she had bought it from a merchant named Filner, who often traded with their shop. Filner praised the knife as very good and, to advertise it, asked to try it. After getting the necessary information, the elf left when someone called her. Where did she go? The men in the tavern asked one another if the dark elf swordswoman Belphivia was there. Belphivia was called the Purple Thunder. Cruel had already forged the knives herself. Cruel asked Hang how he would rate her knives. The blacksmith examined it carefully, making the dragon a little nervous. The man noted the knife turned out pretty well and it was a good job. The girl was very happy. Hang admitted he was still amazed by her ability to withstand the heat, and noted that Cruel would make a good blacksmith. He praised her for a job well done. The girl said she enjoyed working with her hands, and that her success owed mainly to having Hang as her teacher. The man looked slightly puzzled. She asked him why he was thinking and whether he was embarrassed. The blacksmith said he was not, and admitted it was the first time anyone had said that to him. He thanked the girl and gave the top of her head a tug. The dragon felt ticklish. Sue invited the blacksmiths to eat. A girl asked what was inside the balls. She said it was a secret and allowed her to eat. A boiled egg was inside. Cruel liked the taste, and Hang decided to try it too. The man couldn't make out the filling and asked what it was. Sue said it was wild strawberry and asked him how it tasted. The hero said the dish had a unique flavor, and that the wild strawberry itself tasted great. He liked the dish. The wolf cub said she would make more pies so the children could eat their fill. The blacksmith suggested they go back to work right after eating, and the girls agreed. In a few days, the boys managed to make 100 knives on time, and the blacksmith thanked Cruel for her help at the forge. The dragon realized Hein could sell swords more successfully than knives. The man thought the same. For now, he decided to stop using knives. The girl did not try to persuade him. The blacksmith saw it was time to pick up the goods, but Filner still hadn't arrived. The dragon suggested going to check, and Sue said the merchant had already arrived. Filner cried and apologized for arriving late. The girl said someone wanted to see Hank, and it turned out to be Belphivia, who apologized and said she had no choice. The elf asked everyone not to blame the merchant for being late. The dragon asked in a grave voice who she was. Belphivia was taken aback. The elf introduced herself to the heroes and asked them to call her Belph. The girl admitted she didn't like her name, so she didn't mind being called by her full name, and the hero asked why the elf didn't like it. Sue admitted she was scared of the elf. Hidden behind the blacksmith, the wolf cub stayed out of sight. The elf hugged the girl and called her a cutie. The girl admitted she had never seen white wolf babies and wanted to take Sue home with her. The wolf club was terrified. Cruel shielded the girl with her own body and told the elf that Sue disliked their actions. Bill switched to the dragon at once. She said she did not know who Cruel was, but the girl had strong muscles. The dragon yelled at the guest. The girls rushed to hang on to help them. The man asked the elf to stop because his friends were uncomfortable. He turned to Belph because she wanted to see him. The elf said that when she finds something beautiful, she cannot resist touching it. Belph said she had heard rumors that the blacksmith made very sharp knives, so to honor Hang's skill, she asked the craftsman to inspect her sword. He took the weapon to inspect it. The elf asked what the blacksmith thought. The man said the sword needed some work. Belph asked what he meant. The blacksmith noticed the edge was uneven in spots and the blade had a slight curve. An experienced swordsman would feel a slight resistance when cutting, he added. The elf agreed with Heng and said valuators would usually grade the sword A or B. The man was clearly different from the others. The hero admitted he had no evaluation magic. Belph offered to appraise the blacksmith's next weapon. The blacksmith removed the broken blade and looked puzzled. Seeing he looked unwell, the girl asked the hero what was wrong. Sue asked if he was okay. Heng had recognized the broken sword as one he had forged. Deeply upset, he apologized to the girl. The elf did not expect the hero to forge it. Hanged admitted he was not the most experienced blacksmith. Belph objected, calling it nonsense. She confirmed the sword was broken, but it was still a very good blade. The girl said every sword eventually breaks, and this one lasted 3 years under a rough swordsman like Belph, adding that if she had not fought that monster, it would have lasted a couple more years. The mention of the monster stunned the blacksmith, but the elf said it was not important. Belph said the sword Hang forged was beautiful in any case. The merchant could not believe that the famous swordswoman Purple Thunder recognized the hero. The man refused to believe that the elf had used his sword. The girl said she had used him only because he was worthy of it, and the elf made one request. She asked the blacksmith to forge a similar sword for her. The blacksmith did not believe her. The elf told him not to be surprised, adding that she had been using his creation the whole time. Hang replied that a blacksmith at the royal court was better than him. Belf said the hero had not understood her, because the first sword she had him examine was made at the royal court. The master could not understand how this happened, and the elf found it curious. It was hard for her to believe a sword like that was made in the royal forge. Hang recalled weapons of similar quality he'd seen in the city. Belf asked again for a sword to be forged for her. The hero noticed the elf's scar and damaged eye. She was slightly embarrassed that he had noticed, as she had tried to hide the eye with her bangs. The elf said the wound was from her youth. The man realized this was not peaceful Japan, but a world full of monsters and beasts. Hang realized that if Belf ordered the sword from someone else, he would still return to battle, and a poor sword could cost the girl her life. The blacksmith admitted he could not bear the thought that someone had died because of him. The hero vowed not to make weapons for murder. He promised to forge a sword to protect Belf. The girl thanked the master. The man thanked the elf for trusting him. They made a deal. Forging a sword took much longer than making a knife, requiring at least 10 days, but Miss Belf was willing to wait. The blacksmith prepared and started working. The hero picked Damascus steel for his sword. The man explained to the girls that steel is a metal made by a special process. The steel reaches 1,500 to 1,600 degrees Celsius, almost twice the 900 degrees used in knife production. Hang asked Cruel to help him, and she was overjoyed while Sue got ready to clean up. The blacksmith got to work. They began with drawing, which stretches and contracts the steel. The boys reheated the crushed steel, put it back in the furnace to melt, then took it out and added ash. This process improves the steel's purity. The blacksmith stacked the blanks, hammered them, covered them with ash, and repeated the process. The black workers moved on to the forging stage, taking turns hitting the metal with sledgehammers. Cruel pointed out that making weapons is hard work. Hang noted that Japanese swords are especially difficult to make because they must be forged layer by layer. The dragon asked why the hero finally agreed to make the sword after earlier refusing. He asked whether Cruel objected to him making weapons. The girl said she didn't mind. The hero said he wanted to test his strength and see what he was capable of. The sword Miss Belf brought was made by him long ago, and now he wants to make another like it. The blacksmith wanted to see what he could do now. Heng's new forge also held a mysterious power. The master believed combining this power with his improved skills would let him forge an amazing sword. The hero told Cruel he was glad for the chance, admitting he had never felt such excitement and was enjoying himself, and Hang was more excited about his work than ever before. With the work finished, the sword was ready. The girl described the product as very beautiful. Cruel volunteered to try the sword, and the hero agreed. They decided to test the sword on a tree, presented it to the deity, and the hero readied himself before swinging the weapon. A druid appeared as light. The girl was shouted at to make the man look up. Hang struck. Impressed, the blacksmith was on all fours while his girlfriends asked if he was okay. The boys couldn't believe Hang could cut down a tree with one blow. The blacksmith realized he had just forged an excellent weapon. A few days later, I went back to get the bluff product. The man apologized that the sword had to wait, but the elf noticed Hang was very proud of her work and he couldn't deny it. The warrior wanted to examine the weapon. The girls admired the blacksmith's work. The merchant immediately realized, even without an assessment, that the sword was no lower than A rank. She corrected herself and said it was S rank. The elf said the sword felt heavier than she expected. When she began to move, the sword felt surprisingly light, and the master suggested she try it. They tested the sword on a bundle of iron ingots the size of a human torso. Hang knew such a bundle could not be completely cut, even by a sword made at the royal court, so the blacksmith relied on Miss Pluff's skill when forging the blade. The product stayed intact. The sword worked exactly as intended. Every girl was impressed. Both the hero and the swordswoman were pleased. The elf said the Hang sword was very impressive. With minimal effort, the result already looked like this. The girl joked that if she had meant it, the blow would have cut the man in half. Grateful for the blacksmith's work, the warrior said this weapon would let her defeat even a monster. The elf asked how much she would have to pay for the weapon. The master replied she would pay nothing, and said it would be compensation for the sword he had broken earlier. The girl reminded him again that every sword breaks sooner or later. The blacksmith had no reason to worry, so she asked him to accept the payment again. The merchant agreed with the warrior and said working for free is avoiding responsibility for one's work. Hang out with the girls and offer 30 gold pieces for the sword. Belfst said this price was very low because even the worst sword made at the royal court was worth 100 gold coins. The blacksmith said his price only covered the cost of the materials. The elf asked how much the hero's own labor would cost. She began to worry the man wanted more than money, but Hing didn't understand what she meant. Belf offered to teach him how to use a sword instead of giving gold. The girl asked again about the offer. The man wanted to learn to wield the sword he had just forged, called Shadow Strike. Ignore his wishes. She still wanted to know why he was doing this. The hero said he would need to get a bit stronger if he chose to stay here. The man said he needed to learn to handle a weapon to protect himself and his loved ones. Belf understood him and suggested a trial match. Hanged refused to duel because he didn't even know the basics. The warrior said the foundation was important, but the hero would only understand it once he began practicing. The elf told the man not to worry and promised she would hold back in the fight. She decided she would not do this, at least at the start of training. The orphan prepared himself. Sue and the vendor helped them. Hang felt a little nervous. Calm settled over the warrior. Bluff asked the master whether he preferred yuk or seam. The blacksmith did not understand and asked in what sense she meant preferred. The elf swung his sword and replied that apparently he liked yuk better. The man told the warrior to wait, but she had already struck. The hero succeeded in blocking the blow. Bluff noted that the blacksmith seemed skilled. The blacksmith replied that it was just a reaction. The girl suggested they try something different. She attacked again while Hanging kept defending and blocking his opponent's sword. This time the blows struck with greater force than before. The hero already thought the elf was hitting him that way to kill him. The blacksmith assumed he could resist because he had the hero growth skill. Hang, you started adapting to the blows during the battle. Noticing it too, the elf suggested they move a little faster. The man refused, convinced the warrior was making fun of him, and asked her to wait a little longer. Bluff intensified her attack. The blacksmith noticed both the speed and the weight had changed. The girl encouraged him, saying the hero was doing a great job. The elf said they still had a lot of work to do. Hang panicked, knowing he couldn't keep fighting like this, and scrambled for a plan before the girl killed him. He had to time it perfectly. The blows came fast, sometimes from the left, sometimes from the right. When the moment was right, the hero threw himself flat onto his opponent. He knocked the girl to the ground, and they lost their swords. The warrior readied a knife and pressed it to the man's throat. Hanged suggested ending the duel. The elf warned that on the battlefield you cannot win by merely pushing the enemy back. In the warrior's eyes, the man saw his frightened reflection. He apologized and said he was giving up. The girl said the move he'd made wasn't bad. They both said that when the blacksmith pushed her, she feared he might do something indecent, and the man told her not to imagine anything. The hero even suspected that all dark elves were like this girl. Hanga's girlfriends came to see him. They felt genuinely happy for their friends. The girl said it was amazing. They were surprised to discover a blacksmith could fight. Hang admitted he was just watching Miss Bluff's movements. Cruel noted it was still amazing, and in the end she didn't even have time to see the blow. The elf admitted she hadn't noticed the attack until she shifted her stance. The hero felt a bit embarrassed. The warrior added that Master Hang is nearly an A-rank swordsman. The man was extremely surprised. He could hardly believe he was nearly an A rank. The dragon said she already knew. Cruel said Hang was actually very strong because she would not allow a normal person near a holy dragon. The elf was captivated by what was said about the holy dragon. The girl noted that ordinary people are overwhelmed by dragons' intense energy and cannot get close, but harsh and cruel circumstances reveal new facts. Bluff said the blacksmith could get close because he had great potential. The man couldn't see any potential in himself. The elf said Hangi was hiding his potential and encouraged him to believe in himself more. The blacksmith wondered how anyone could believe in themselves. He saw himself as a plain office worker from Japan who was brought into this world and turned into a decorative hero. He had always thought his strength was insignificant. The girls told him this was not true. The elf paused, waiting for the hero's reply. The man said he would try to have more confidence in himself. The warrior said it was a good answer, and added that after all, Hang could forge such a good sword. She suggested they give the sword a special name. Already the blacksmith had an idea. They pointed up at the sky. The sword was named Skyward Aiming. The hero said he named it to honor the possibilities that are as endless as the sky. Elphicka liked the name, it fit her weapon. He added that the name suited the warrior herself better, and the girl was struck by his words. Hang said Bluff's blue eyes made him think of the sky. The elf felt embarrassed. Sadly, the girl admitted she couldn't do it anymore. The hero asked what was wrong. Bluff hugged the stunned hero, telling him he was a great guy. He couldn't tell what the girl was doing. Yulf said Hang was her favorite, but he didn't understand her. The girl said that the blacksmith is very cool and kind, makes amazing swords, and is very strong, and the elf said that she had been looking for someone like him for a long time. Bluff asked Hang if he would be with her. Cruel refused and seized the blacksmith. She called him her master, which made the hero feel very awkward. The elf said she was his master. Tension between the rivals was rising. Sue shouted that it was unfair and said she wanted it too. The girl started an argument. The merchant watched the whole scene and witnessed a shocking quarrel. The hero had no idea what was happening. This whole situation left him very confused. Bluff said she would take the hero and look after him. For a while, she left the forge with the merchant. The boys said goodbye to the warrior, but Cruel was very angry with her. Hang noticed that the elf turned out to be quite good. The wolf cub inside of the dragon asked him seriously whether he really liked women like that. The man gave a sheepish denial. He started walking away slowly as the girls tried to stop him. The newly summoned hero sat alone with tea and waited for her teacher, who turned out to be Belf, and the elf apologized for making the girl wait. The heroine said teacher Belfaville was late. The elf said she had already asked to be called Belf more than once. She said that phrasing is common politeness because a teacher is a teacher. The warrior complained about the man's stubbornness. The elf pointed out it was easier with the heroine's companion. The girl did not understand her. The teacher didn't explain and told everyone not to pay attention. The heroine noticed the elf's new sword. Belf agreed with Endo, saying she had found a great option. The girl apologized that the elf had to switch weapons, and the heroine said it was her fault. The warrior protested, saying they were both to blame. Endo noticed the source woman was in a good mood today and asked what had happened. The elf said she had simply met a curious man. The heroine immediately realized that the teacher finding the man strange meant they were dueling. The elf's satisfied look immediately confirmed the girl's words. Endo said sadly that whenever Bluff saw potential in someone, he couldn't help himself. The alpha said it only made her feel better and there was nothing to worry about. Bluff, Endo noticed the man was not as strong as she was. The teacher announced it was time for night training. The heroine didn't immediately understand the elf. Stars were already shining in the night sky. Cruel announced at a hang that she had found a strange tree. Sue and the blacksmith needed a break from their work. The wolf cubs thought the plant was funny. The dragon said she had never seen a tree like that before. The hero recognized the plant as bamboo, and Hang said it usually grows in his world. Lamont recalled that summoning a hero is an ancient magical ritual. The blacksmith wanted to know whether bamboo had come to this world because of the ancient heroes. Hang hadn't expected to see him here at all. The girls wanted to make a fishing rod from bamboo and go fishing, but they knew nothing about fishing or how to make a rod. The man explained that you need to wind the line onto the rod so you can fish, and suggested his friends try it. None of the girls understood it, but they still wanted to try. The boys went to the river. Sue wore the summer clothes the vendor had given her. The girls were glad to be going fishing. On the shore, the hero made fishing rods. He demonstrated how the trick with the line and the hook worked. With worms on the hooks, they could catch many fish, and Sue really wanted to eat fish. The boys cast their lines and watched the float. They stood there for a long time, and cruelty began to show. Sue complained that she couldn't catch a thing. The dragon said nothing was working because of him. The man asked who she meant. They showed him a black spot in the water that was driving all the fish away. Pruel grew angry and drew her bow. She fired an arrow into the water. At that spot, an explosion occurred in the water, sending a tall column of water upward. The boys couldn't understand what was happening. The dragon was furious. Even the river seemed offended. The hero saw the blob dodge the blow, and Sue observed the creature was large and fast. It stirred the river. In anger, the creature splashed water on the boys. Cruel grew very angry and threatened to turn into a dragon. Hanged tried to calm her and realized something. The hero assumed the black spot was the owner of the river, and even though he had never seen a fishing rod, he knew it was a trap. He told the girl not to worry. But Cruel was already furious. She declared she wanted to catch him and asked for a fishing rod that could reel in the owner of the river. The boys head back to the forge. The dragon asked how Hanged was getting along with the new duck. The hero admitted it would be hard to make that kind of fishing rod without a rigid material. Cruel was upset they didn't have soft steel or anything similar, and the man agreed. A memory came back to him. Hang knew that when he worked at the forge, he always tried to make a good product, and the sword he made for Bluff was no different. Thanks to his efforts, the finished sword reached S rank. The hero grew curious about what would happen if he tried to make soft iron. You had to try, if only to find out. The man asked the dragon for an idea, and the girl wanted to know what Hang had already thought up. The team got to work. The hero realized his forge was truly magical. He tried to recall the lessons taught at the royal court. The teacher's words about what mattered most in magic stayed with him. Hang replied that the most important things in magic are talent and knowledge. They agreed with him. The magician, however, wanted to point out something more important. In magic, the key is to fully embody the image. Forging the metal, the blacksmith told himself the soft iron would take shape. The material was prepared. Heng gave the new fishing rod a swing to test its strength. He swung it hard in every direction. The girls were visibly impressed. Cruel said the finished material was as light as bamboo, and Sue was impressed by how the stick dangled. The blacksmith said the new fishing rod was almost finished and just needed the line tied on. Cruel has become a sacred dragon. She suggested using her dragon's hair as the fishing line. The man said this was not a bad idea. They told the hero he could go fishing again, and Hang agreed it was time for revenge. The boys head back to the river. They spotted the river's master. A large spot marked the fish. The friends spotted a large fish in the water. Hanged, remind the girls to use bait. He casts his line into the river. The hero was letting out the fishing line. Something stirred in the water. Cruel saw the bait was working, and Sue was delighted. The spot moved toward Hank's fishing rod. The bait worked, and the creature lunged at the hook for the worms. Hanging recognizes the right moment to act. The hero tries to hold his ground. The girls hug the old man to keep him in place. Sue also turns to Drew for help and asks him to cook something tasty to show her thanks. Surprised, the hero notices the liana. The man asks everyone to help her get herself together. The heroes are straining to pull up something that could be a fish. Hein keeps pulling hard and lands a massive fish. He checks the girl's condition to ensure she is all right. The girls said they were unharmed. Prue points at something, drawing the others' attention. At the sight of the large creature, Sue cries out with joy. The girls are pleased that Hang caught the creature. The hero confirms they finished the task together. The man says he is satisfied and everything is ready. The girls look pleased. The hero displays the royal fried fish he cooked for Cruel. Sue notes it is perfectly cooked, and Cruel admires its appearance. The girls enjoy the fish and thank Hang for the delicious meal. Hanged smiles, saying they all caught this fish together and that his perfect life in another world has become extraordinary. The girl savors the food, closing her eyes in pleasure. The hero warns her not to run so she won't fall. The girl, surprised, says she is fine. The Sue fell. Hang asks where it hurts. The girl says it doesn't hurt anywhere but has noticed something. Sue points to the mushrooms and the hero notices them, admiring the girl's observation. The hero explains one mushroom looks like an egg yolk and is called eggshell, while the other black mushroom resembles a poisonous species. The girl says she does not understand what is happening. Hang, assuming the white wolf tribe with their keen sense of smell would know about such things. Cruella happily says she has also found mushrooms. Surprised by the mushroom's size, she calls it huge. Another girl asks whether it is a monster. Someone is distracting Hane. The hero is startled to find ash hounds standing before them. Sue greets her parents warmly. Hangs asks why the girl's parents are present. They say they came to help because the ash hounds have harmed the white wolf tribe. They say these creatures are more unpleasant than powerful. If she could fight like a dragon, she says she would defeat the ash hounds. The girl adds that the forest spirits might be angry if she sets the trees on fire. The father says their current leader is especially cunning, and the mother says he attacked one of them at night, seriously wounding him. The hero wonders whether this leader is the same one they saw earlier. Sue also says they take food and money from their stores. The band notes these creatures are fast, organized, and have sharp claws and fangs. Feeling obligated to these people, the girl says she wants to help. Hang proposes making armor. Yigal, surprised, asks if that is really true. The hero says they also live in the forest and are ready to help if they can be useful. The group appreciates the offer of assistance. You note that iron armor is too heavy for their needs. He notes they don't want to lose mobility. one of the White Wolf tribe's key strengths. The hero says he recently took apart the forge and found something. Hang calls them cubes and explains they are tools for plasticizing metal rods. The man wonders if the gal was distracted while the hero asks him to wait. The hero shows how to secure the part. A cruel person is offered to pull. Hangi explains you must push a steel rod through a die with smaller holes to change its thickness. Notice the result looks like a thread. The hero explains that the process of pulling metal out is called drawing. The man says they will need more help from them. The hero demonstrates wrapping an iron wire around a metal rod and then cutting it to make a loop. Sue proudly says she has made many rings. The hero notes her skill. The girl asks if she is having fun. Sue says she is and adds that if she works hard, she will be able to help her mom and dad. Determined, she will do her best not to cause trouble in the future. The hanged woman strokes her head. The hero declares that everything is ready. Surprised, the girl asks what the object is, since she has never seen anything like it. Yeagle says the chain skin is light and gives much greater freedom of movement than heavy armor. This should provide mobility and protection for the White Wolf tribe. Yeagle is determined to try something. Sue says her father failed to make the armor, but she is glad it survived the test. Her father says he put a lot of effort into the work. The hero cautions them against celebrating too soon and reminds them they must keep working to protect the whole tribe. The group unites and agrees to keep working together. The girls are busy making armor. Happily, the group agrees that they now all have what they need. Apologizing for the trouble, they turn to Master Hang, and the hero reminds them that the force problems are connected to his own. The hero offers to join them, noting he faces the same problems. Cruel is determined to go with them because, as a guardian dragon, she must protect the forest. Other characters also want to join. The hero warns her it is dangerous and tells her to stay quiet. The girl says she is also from the tribe and wants to fight on equal terms with everyone. Yeagle asks whether she is prepared to risk her life, and Sue insists on helping. He turns toward Master Hing. The hero offers to protect the girl himself, using force, while the others follow their own tactics. Sue becomes a member of the group. The group realizes they have become a perfect pack and join forces to fight the forest's ash hounds. A hero urges the warriors of the Wolf Tribe city to stay strong. Yeagle decisively declares war on the ash hounds, raises his sword, and wins the support of the other participants. A group of characters stand together, preparing to act. Yeagle catches the ash hound's scent and points toward it. Hanging asks where exactly. He says he sees only one hound, while the hero insists there are two. Yeagle confirms they really are ash hounds. Hang says he uses a telescope to look at distant objects. The man says he has a good nose and ears but poor eyesight, so it surprises them that he uses a telescope. Yeagle notices the scent is stronger and guesses the flock has 10 or 8 members. The hero asks how far they are from the target. Hanging estimates the target's distance, saying it's about 400 meters or under 450 steps. He wonders if this is the main pack. At first, the pack splits into several groups, which then break into many smaller units, and the hero explains that the leader directs the whole pack while the others run their squads. It looks like an army, so the pack the heroes are hunting must be bigger. Yeagle, surprised, asks about the smell. He believes they are a tribe of white wolves and fears they may be linked to the disappearance of one of their members. Yeagle insists they must go to the rescue at once. The hero turns to Mr. Yeagle and urges him to wait. The hero tells Sue to come with him, and she agrees. Hangi sees that the other's strength lets them move so fast he can barely keep up. Finding other white wolves here surprises him, since it is unusual. A group of heroes stands surrounded by many evil wolves on the field. After the ash hounds stole the goal, Yeagle realizes the situation is a trap. The wolves launch their attack, leaping onto the heroes with ferocity. Hanging warns from Yeagle's attack. Hanged shields Sue with his body while the other heroes try to help. The heroes talk about how their superior armor let them fend off the wolf attack. Yeagle says they used the captured gold and furs. Hanged says the enemy proved more cunning than expected. The boy objects, saying ash hounds are not that clever or far-sighted. The heroes admit that although their opponents were clever, they were not helpless and handled the situation. A few days go by. A band of heroes charges at their enemies. The young man attacks with his sword. The enemy smirks, leaving Hang surprised and wondering why they are so confident. Hanging tells his ally that Cruel's signal is active. Heroes sprint toward the goal. Hanged sees they are being chased by enemies, and Yeagle agrees. The hound nearly bites the cloak. The heroes trap the enemies, catching them, and one enemy orders the rest to run to safety. Sue wants to know why the wolves were chasing them. She summons the wolves to catch up with her. Wolves attack the heroine and try to catch her. One of the wolves jumps on Sue, putting her in danger, but someone rescues her. Pearl uses his powers and fires at the hound. The heroine commends Sue for her excellent work. Hang notes that Sue has drawn the attention of all the ashhounds, and Cruel has done a great job as well. The heroes assemble, surrounded by wolves, ready for the next stage. Determined, Hang says it's their turn to act now. The heroes plan to use bait to lure the ashhounds into one spot and then attack. Sue backs the plan and volunteers to be bait and carry out the task, but Yagal disagrees. She says she wants to serve as bait. Hein tries to stop her because it is dangerous. Sue tries to persuade them, telling the hero the bait should be someone who is not very strong. The girl says she is also from the White Wolf tribe and regards herself as a warrior. Hing realizes the girl is serious and accepts her decision. She thanks him for his support. Perul will protect the girl, and she agrees with the decision. Her parents express pride and emphasize their confidence that she is worthy of trust and ready to participate in the mission. The mother shows trust and confidence by telling her daughter she is counting on her. Hang spots a large wolf approaching and says it is the pack leader. Egol says firmly he will deal with the leader now. Sue screams at her father as the leader's blow sends him backward into a tree. The heroes are surprised to see their leader deflect an arrow. The heroes think their leader is a mutant, and Hang asks Cruel what is wrong. Cruel explains that some creatures are born exceptionally strong and tries to turn into a dragon, but is stopped. The white-haired girl supports the hero and wonders why he can't believe in his own strength. Hangi insists he can handle it himself. The hero senses the enemy's threat, gets goosebumps along his spine, and realizes the enemy intends to kill him. The enemy lunges at the hero with fury. The man shows confidence. As the leader jumps on Hang, the man draws his sword and stabs the enemy. He lands a heavy blow on the opponent. The group of heroes, all girls, react with surprise and admiration at Hang's actions. The hero defeated their leader and rejoiced. Sue suggests capturing their main ash hounds, but Yeagle objects, saying it's unnecessary because the hounds will stop attacking once they lose their leader. The girls launch an attack on Hing. They say he was cool. Thank you both, girls. The city's leader had their head turned into a trophy. The heroes raise their glasses to toast their victory over the ash hounds, honor their bravery, and drink every last drop. Hang looks at the plate holding the drink, then drinks every drop. The heroes are taking a break and enjoying themselves. The celebration went on for 3 days and 3 nights. The pack's heroes face each other to say goodbye. The heroes thank Master Hang for his help. Yigal says without Hang's help, they'd still fear the ash hounds, and their packs would be fighting each other. Hinge once more. Mounting his horse, the hero notices someone insulting him again and calling him a mere decoration, which irritates him. The man thanks everyone for their participation and support. The heroes talk warmly and invite each other to meet again for a drink. Eagle replies happily and agrees to the proposal. He asks Sue to come back to them. Yigal has now thought about having a warrior take the dangerous role of bait for the group. The heroine speaks to her parents and the pack. She wants to learn from Hang and stresses the need to help the whole family. Sue wants to be with Cruella and Hang. Finally, the group agrees happily. You apologize to him for disturbing him. The man says it is fine and that he does not mind. Yeagle says Sue chose her own path, and the group fully trusts her. The group thanks Master Hain for his help and support, bidding him farewell with kind words. The king, disappointed, asks the man before him why he lost again. He says the hero's unique skill, Wind Guardian, is an extraordinary power unlike the abilities of past heroes. The hero still wonders why they were defeated. Declaring the soldiers not at fault, the girl accepts full responsibility for the defeat. She urges people to stop blaming the soldiers, stressing they are innocent and willing to accept all the consequences themselves. After her defeat, the king asks if Kenai has anything else to say, and she says she does not want to seem arrogant. She has a request. The white-haired girl looks surprised and starts wondering where the needed item might be. Pruel finds what she's been looking for. The heroes discover honey that is very sweet, much to the crew's delight. Hang finds an insect like a Hercules beetle and says it came from his home world. Sue decides to catch it. A young man warns the heroine that it is not safe to go too deep into the forest, but she presses on with confidence. A huge bear suddenly appears and acts aggressively to protect its honey. The bear attacks her hanging. Using magic, the girl hits the bear. Lady Kania arrives and rescues Hang from a bear attack, showing her strength and skill. The heroes chat over barley tea. and the girl is surprised to discover it's her first time drinking it since arriving in this world. Heng says cold barley tea is perfect for summer. The girls realize their master knows the woman. May I ask the man who the girls are? They help at the forge and are his neighbors. The girl now knows where he works. Heng says he enjoys blacksmithing and thanks the king and ministers for the opportunity. I admit that the hero's new life has just begun. Heng says she probably came here because she has many worries. The girl asks him to teach her how to make swords. Noticing the girl is hiding something, the man doubts her request and decides to find out the truth. Hangi wants to uncover the truth about her. To help Kanai settle in, Master Hank asks Cruel to teach her basic blacksmithing. Cruel and Kanai start working together at the forge. Awkward at first, but after a few days, they become friends. The heroines discuss flavor combinations for making onigiri when Hang says rice and strawberries don't go together, surprising the others. A few days passed. Can I finish the sword and declare it ready? Master Hang asks if she's sure she did everything correctly. And Cruel says she helped, but it was really Master Kenny's work. The hero is surprised that a rapier was chosen for the sword. She finds it odd, but that's the image that came to her mind. He says the result is not bad for a forging enthusiast, though some doubts remain. The hero invites Kanade to test her strength against his because he wants to fight her. Kanye is surprised and doesn't understand what's being said. She cannot understand because this is a duel against a master. I admit she doesn't like this sort of thing. Hanging explains that it's a kind of test for the weapon. The hero notes that although Kenai made the sword, it has Kenai's name engraved on it, so Kenai can't just give it away. Offering a bet, he says if he loses, he'll make her a gold sheath or something. She asks what will happen if he wins. The hero wants to hear the truth from the girl, that she had been hiding all along. Without warning, the man attacks the girl. The hero realizes she talks more than she acts. The heroine firmly says this is not the hero's concern and tries to push him away. In an instant, she lunges at the hero, her sword slamming against his. Hungi says the rapier she made is good but still too rough. He tells her that if she had forged the sword with all her heart, it would not have broken so easily. The hero asks Kanai where she is hurrying to. A girl asks the hero for something. Kanai is crying and asks Master Hang for help, talking about her mentor Belphivia. The king says he opposes saving Belphivia. May I ask him why? The man says that although Belphivia is a famous swordsman called the Purple Thunder, she saved many soldiers' lives during this war. The king replies that while she is a capable warrior, she lacks the special skills of heroes. The girl explains that the country lost many soldiers in the last battle and now lacks resources, so she volunteers to save Belphivia. The senior military commander warns that sending heroes risks leaving the front lines undefended and exposing the country to demonic attack. He doubts sending a rescue team because it might cause more losses. The king announces he will give Kanaya a vacation. He says they can't send the hero into battle alone, and rest will help her calm down and think clearly about the situation. The man hopes she rests well, explaining why she hid the truth from the start. She admits she did not want to ruin the hero's new life. She watched the heroes having fun and thought joining them would be selfish, but when she saw them fighting a bear, she decided to help despite being scared. The hero persuades the girl that they have gone too far to turn back. Hanged admits Miss Belf was the first person to recognize him as a warrior, so he cannot do otherwise. The hero and the girl spot a creepy forest ahead that is controlled by demons. They discuss the difficult situation, including a major battle that took place there 2 weeks ago, because mithril ore is found there. The hero notes the war began over this ore, and even with Kenai and Belf's help, they lost the battle. Heng asks the girl what happened to her weapons. Kaniye replies that all her weapons were taken away when she was given leave. The hero notices that the girl's skirt, made by Cruel, looks beautiful. The man offers his katana to the girl, and she asks if he is sure about his decision. Heng says she has more experience. The hero says he has a secret weapon, surprising the girl, and they hurry because he is worried about Miss Belf. Cruel hopes Hane will be okay. The girl insists on going with him, but Hang says it's better for her to stay home. Hang explains he wants her kept safe because of her power. Sue supports them in the conversation, insisting everything will be fine. The girl agrees with Hang's decision, saying she is confident he will return. Can I tell the hero to lie down? 2 demons suddenly appear, one holding a torch. Keen warns the demons that they have very good hearing and should be careful. Hang tells the girl she is close to him. Can he quietly warn him not to make noise? The girl wonders why an army of demons is in a place like this. The hero wonders whether they are looking for Belf, but denies it. Can I seize the kimono of the girl sitting in the carrier? One of the demons says the woman is destined for the Lord and should be grateful since she might have died out in the field. A girl is trying to say something. The same girl in the carrier appears. The hero recognizes Miss Belf Lelva as a brigadier. The demons hear them and demand to know who is there. Can I say in a tense voice that they have been noticed? The heroes decide to flee to avoid detection, and Hang reassures her that if they are caught, rescue will be impossible. About to fly away, the girl orders the hero to shut his mouth. The heroes feel a sudden shock and fear as they take off. Hang is amazed to see Kanai's unique skill, Wing Guardian, for the first time. Thanking Master Hang, she says she could not have reached her destination without him. He replies they are even now. He says she should warn him in advance next time. Kanai asks why their teacher was in such a dangerous place. One of them points out that demons really do eat people, even though that was known only from legends. Hank thinks the teachers might be sacrificed. Can I say that they should go there immediately? The man realizes the goal is directly on his path. A group of heroes rushes toward their destination, battling demons across several buildings. They stand in the corridor. Miss Belf sits in the other room. They suddenly spot a group of demons feasting. Hang says Belf wonders why everything worked out so well. That's a good question. Hanging, can you stand in front of the teacher? The woman asks why the master is here. Hanging says they came to save her. Belfry reminds them that they are in demon territory. Can I also say that she can only rely on a very limited number of people and ask that her student not be left alone? Belf wants her student to gain independence as soon as possible. She thanks the man for saving her. Hang says he feels the same as Kinai and admits he still has much to learn from her. He urges a quick retreat so they do not become victims. Belf doesn't understand which victims are being referred to. Now the stranger knows where the smell of people comes from. The demon asks the heroes why they broke into his mansion without an invitation.